Amarga Victoria respectfully acknowledges the first people of the land on which we make this podcast, the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nations. We would like to acknowledge that museums, galleries, and other arts and cultural organisations within Victoria sit on unceded lands. This is Closer Look, a podcast by Amarga Victoria. I'm Maria Pia Dunn.
And I'm Cav P.
I love the incorporation of a map. Where is your family from? What's your migration story? It shows how much it's like this space is for people to almost reflect on their own family stories and such.
Bulavinaka and buongiorno to all. In the next 2 episodes of Closer Look, Maria and I will explore Victorian museum spaces that share and pay tribute to each of our family's cultural heritage. In this first part, we're paying a visit to the Museo Italiano, where we'll learn a little about Maria's relationship to the space, and chat with Elizabeth Triarico, the manager of the museum. Ready for a voyage of self-discovery, Maria?
Not my first voyage of self-discovery, not my last. I find it very fun to come here just because I always feel very at home.
So what's your history with this place? When did you first find out about it and come here?
Well, the funny thing is that I always kind of hung out because my mum did a lot of work with COASIT and such. So I would often come to COASIT with her because they have a library resource centre for the community to access. But I didn't really know about the museum really until a lot later.
Since 2010, the Museo Italiano has showcased records, images, and objects from the Italian Historical Society in the Carlton district of Melbourne. It tells the stories of Italian migrants to Australia from the early days of European settlement. A special highlight is the detailed timeline which covers significant and parallel events in the history of Italy, Australia, and the world, including how historical events like the World Wars and Italian fascism impacted the Italian presence in Australia. Walking through the exhibition feels strangely familiar, even without having a connection to Italy. The story of trying to make a space for yourself and your culture in a new and often unwelcoming world is a common narrative to those of us whose families have migrant backgrounds.
My name is Elizabeth Triarico, and I'm the manager of the Italian Historical Society and Museo Italiano at COASIT in Melbourne, located in Carlton. I'm first generation born here, and a lot of the stories that we tell are about first generation Italians who come out here. It's not necessarily that first generation that collects the stories, they create the stories, but it's their children that come after, and that's what I do with the collection. I feel responsible for those histories.
One thing I noticed as a linguist straight away is the bilingual captions, which is really cool.
For an older generation of Italians, say my nonna, for example, she never spoke English. And even though she's not with us right now, I like the idea that I could come to this exhibition with her, and share that kind of history and knowledge with her.
That's what I love about it too, because I see that's the intergenerational aspects of it, that even with younger people, they can connect to their grandparents through it because they can share, and as you say, in both languages, which I think is actually a very important thing. The exhibition itself, because it's part of the Italian community, it's just filled with family stories because they're almost all interconnected. One of the interesting things that happened last year, we had a family come from regional Victoria, and this gentleman had turned up, and he's 93 years old, and his mother is actually represented in the Museo Italiano exhibition. So he brought his family and his great-grandchildren with him just to see the photo of his mother in the wedding photo. And that was really special, just to see that.
I love these photos. There's a wedding photo where there's people with a beehive as bridesmaids. They almost look like photos that you could have, at your parents' house or your grandparents' house or something like that.
Recently, we had some young people come out from Italy. First thing I thought was, young people, old museum. And I thought, how do we connect the two and make it alive? Because Italians from Italy coming here going to a museum. We don't have a Mona Lisa here. You know, this is what we're competing against. Right, I'm sorry. And I was really looking at explaining it's about what people went through before they came out here, these young people, for what they're doing, for them to understand some of the difficulties people had in establishing themselves, the things they find for granted, getting a coffee now on the street, sitting outside, having a pizza whenever they want to. And I got such great feedback. I was really blown away because I thought this is a very tough audience to work with. So it's about emotion. It's about connecting through the heart. And I think it worked.
Can I ask when your family first came to Australia and under what circumstances?
Yes, so it was in the 1960s. My Zia ended up getting married to a farmer in Australia, and then the whole family immigrated to join her.
Older people, when they know younger people, the generation, next generation, interested in their history, they feel safe because they can talk to someone about what they've been through, and they know that that's going to be passed on to the future, but in a way that it's protected in some ways, or told in a way that they feel safe. So it doesn't mean that you don't tackle difficult issues. It just means you're respectful of where the stories are coming from and what people want to tell.
What I also like is that it's an Italian-Australian story. You know, it starts with talking about migration, and then it kind of ends with this kind of celebration of the different ways in which Italian culture has kind of interacted with Australian identity. And that means a lot.
Yeah, it's a very triumphant museum, I feel, in terms of, there were struggles, but there was so much joy that continues to this day.
Looking straight ahead, there's a image of I believe is the first coffee machine. Yes.
Oh.
No, it's not the first, but it's one of the earliest espresso machines to arrive in Australia.
I also love that, coffee is something that Melbourne is really famous for now, and it came from, the Italian migration. So a big part of Melbourne identity is Italian or comes from Italy. And I like that there's there is a whole display case here that is just dedicated to coffee,
Yeah.
It makes it a very Melbourne experience as well.
One of the things we're looking at, because we're going to be upgrading the exhibition, is I want to expand on the regions, because we don't talk about the regions. And that's part of being, we're talking about Australian, Italian identity, because the regions are an important part of that, because you're not just Italian, you're a part of a region. Sometimes it goes right down to a town as to who you are. So that's why it's actually quite complex. But I think in this country still we have that opportunity to choose in many ways what we want to focus on. So we're very, lucky to be able to do that too.
So the main target audience of the Museo Italiano is the Australian Italian community?
Yeah, and it's interesting saying that too, because we've recently been involved with the creation of a new museum in Genova in Italy on emigration. And so they have a whole section on Australia. Last year when they launched their new museum, we actually sent them a lot of material telling the story of Australia. So that's actually feeding the story back overseas to help people in Italy understand what happened to these people who left their shores. We're able to connect back to Italy and make that 360 connection with what's happening, and people want to know about it, which I find really fantastic because, that it's come from a need, because why else would they do it? And it's even not just the Italian community, because we've been part of Open House Melbourne last couple of years. And I think it was the first year that we took part, I had a group of Chinese family who came, and they came to talk to me afterwards. And the man was almost in tears. And he was saying to me, this story is our story. It's about family. And so there's even connecting with other cultures because they can see objects, they can feel the sense of connectedness and the journey that we're all on, in Australia in particular. So it's opening up all levels of stories.
What makes me feel so much joy is just how much it's tied in with people's stories, people's families, and, to have that connection also to my family and such. And even though I don't have any family stories here, it's like that collectiveness that makes you feel seen.
Yeah. So what's your favorite section?
For me, I guess I have such a strong pride for Italian entertainment because it's so cheeky, even if you look down here, there's a display of the masks of Commedia dell'arte. And what I find is that it's one of those kind of art styles that is just so about making fun of different social statures and such.
Talking about those masks, what I find really interesting about them is that Commedia d'arte, people look at them, and unless you understand Commedia d'arte, you don't know what those masks really are, which I find a real shame because it really goes right back to early stories of theatre, because that's the beginnings of theatre. That area I would really love to explore a lot more because those key characters aren't even explored, because I think you need to see the performance, so you can get a feeling for the characters because they're the ones that have travelled through history. Plus, it's an easy way into a culture, I think, as well.
So, Elizabeth, what would you say is the future of Museo Italiano?
And I think technology is what's helping us in the future reach further. I've just finished finalising an upgrade of our virtual reality tour, and one of the things I did specifically for that was to include the information on the panels in both English and Italian. Because with something like that, the audience is expanded outside the walls of the exhibition, which is fantastic. So we get to share it all over the world, and so more people can actually learn. It means that people who can't physically come in for whatever reason still get a chance to experience the history and the knowledge. The technology also gives us the opportunity to be fresh because you can change the stories that you talk about more easily, adding, removing, and also giving the opportunity for people to engage. There's a bright future for the Italian Historical Society and the Museo Italiano, whatever form the new one takes, because we're wanting to reach further and just also make more things available that you normally couldn't make available. That whole interconnectedness, I think, is really fantastic, and the opportunities that we have in the future. I think the whole idea of family is a really great means of connecting people that otherwise you wouldn't connect with. It connects you with home. It creates a home for you. And it actually provides a wonderful way of understanding the past. Because if it's connected personally to you, to your family, whatever family you have, then that's the way people understand. It's our way of connecting and forging the future together.
And that just about wraps it up for today. The Museo Italiano can be found in the Coazet building at 189 Faraday Street in Carlton, where it's open from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. from Tuesday to Friday and 1 p.m. to 5 p.m. on Saturdays, except for public holidays. A huge thank you to Elizabeth Triarico for her contributions to this episode. In the next episode, we'll be exploring the Te Pacifica Gallery and Melbourne Museum to share my own connection with Fiji and learn from its curator, Sione Napi Francis, about how the space was designed by and for Pacifica diaspora to help keep them connected with their ancestors across the ocean. Grazie for listening, and we'll see you next time on Closer Look.